Okay, let's unpack this. We've been seeing the usual whispers, but now we've got something pretty solid looking. We're doing a deep dive today into, well, a whole stack of these anticipated leaks. Very granular stuff on the design, and crucially, the exact dimensions for the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S26 series. That's the S26, the S26 Plus, and yeah, the big one, the S26 Ultra.
hmm And these aren't just, vague rumors floating around,
Yeah.
details we're digging into. They apparently come straight from well-regarded, trusted Samsung leakers.
Right.
So this level of dimensional info, it's not just like tech spec trivia. It really feels like a blueprint. It kind of lays out Samsung's whole game plan for the next flagships.
Absolutely. And the main theme, the sort of thesis coming out of all this material, it seems pretty clear. Samsung's going for, let's call it gradual development and design precision.
Yeah, refinement.
Exactly. We're not really expecting some huge radical visual change this time around. It looks like the focus is more on these critical, almost surgical tweaks, subtle improvements to the dimensions, probably aimed at enhancing how it feels to actually hold and use. So the mission for you listening in today is to figure out what these fractions of a millimeter really mean, for performance, for feel, for everything.
And that whole strategy, precision over revolution,
Yeah.
you see it right across the lineup. The sources are suggesting Samsung's mostly focused on, well, slight refinements to the physical shape compared to the S25s. When a big player like Samsung does that, opts for these subtle changes, it often signals they think they've kind of hit a sweet spot with the general form factor. Now it's about engineering efficiency, tweaking it.
Okay, so if the overall look stays pretty similar, how does that refinement actually translate into a better, physical phone? Where are they actually shaving off these tiny bits?
Well, it seems to boil down to two main areas they're optimizing, kind of across the board. First, getting that profile visibly thinner, maybe more tactilely thinner too,
Yeah.
for a better grip, maybe more premium feel.
Right.
And second, nudging the screen size up a bit, but without making the whole phone feel, drastically bigger.
Which is always that tricky balancing act, isn't it? The manufacturing tightrope. You want a bigger display, you got to trim the bezels, maybe redesign the chassis, or the phone just gets bigger.
Precisely. And the goal seems to be enhancing structural efficiency and weight. It's not just about looks. Making the most of that internal space, even by fractions of a millimeter, that becomes really key for fitting in, say, better cooling, bigger camera parts, or just optimizing the battery shape. And that tension, wanting it thinner but needing space inside, that's what we see playing out differently in each of these three models.
Right. Let's maybe start with the base model then, the Galaxy S26. This is the one I gotta say that surprised me the most. The dimensional shift here feels proportionally quite significant compared to the S25. Feels like this is where Samsung is maybe willing to experiment a bit more.
Yeah, it does seem like the most dynamic of the three. Looking at the leaked S26 dimensions, 149.4 millimeters long, 71.5 millimeters wide. And here's the key part. The thickness drops to 6.9 millimeters.
Wow, 6.9.
And that goes along with a small but noticeable screen increase to 6.3 inches.
Okay, let's put that side by side with the S25 just to really see the change. The S25 was 146.9 millimeters long,
Yeah?
70.5 wide, and 7.2 millimeters thick, with a 6.2-inch screen.
Yeah, that difference, especially the thickness, that 0.3 millimeter drop, that can feel pretty significant in the hand.
It really can. So the S26 looks like it'll be noticeably thinner. That 0.3 millimeters is quite a bit. And it's also getting, 2.5 millimeters longer. So the main takeaway here seems to be Samsung decided to make the phone longer to fit that bigger screen and whatever needs to go inside, but they really wanted to make it thinner at the same time.
That extra length is interesting, actually. It probably helps Samsung in a few ways. Like, it might let them use a longer, slimmer battery cell. That can fill the space more efficiently than a shorter, fatter one.
Okay.
And it gives them that much-needed vertical space for things like heat dissipation layers,
Okay.
which is super important as chips keep getting faster and, hotter. That 0.3 millimeter thickness reduction, though, that suggests some serious component rejigging, maybe impacting the battery design or even how deep the main camera module sits.
So for the S26, we can kind of summarize it as Samsung's pushing for maximum slimness and a bigger screen, even if it means making the phone a bit taller overall.
That looks exactly right. It feels like quite an aggressive update for the base model, maybe trying to keep it feeling really modern and compactish, even with that slightly larger display.
Okay, so that's the most dynamic change. Now, let's shift gears to what seems like the least changed model, the S26 Plus. Stability seems to be the name of the game here.
Yeah, the S26 Plus looks like it's holding steady. It keeps the 6.7-inch screen size exactly matching the S25 Plus.
And the dimensions?
The dimensions really back that up. It's listed as 158.4 millimeters long, 75.8 wide, and 7.3 millimeters thick. The sources keep saying these numbers are nearly identical or matching the current S25 Plus footprint.
But okay, if the base S26 is getting thinner and the Ultra, which we'll get to in a second, is also slimming down, why keep the Plus stable? It feels a bit counterintuitive. Is Samsung basically saying, look, this size is perfect, we're not messing with it, or is there maybe some manufacturing reason?
Yeah, that's the interesting question here, isn't it? Stability like this could mean a couple of things. Either, like you said, they see that 6.7-inch plus size as the absolute sweet spot for the main market, the biggest seller, most cost-effective size, so they play it safe.
Right.
Or it could suggest they hit some kind of constraint.
A constraint, like...
Well, if the chassis is already super packed, maybe they can't shrink the battery anymore without losing capacity people expect, and maybe they can't shrink the frame without affecting how sturdy it feels. So they just stick with the blueprint.
So if the dimensions are the same, the refinement must be somewhere else. Internal, maybe. Or purely aesthetic. The source mentions enhancing bezels and curves. How much difference does that really make if the size is fixed? Is that just, marketing talk?
It could be partly marketing, sure. But tweaking the curves even slightly can actually change how the phone feels in your hand quite a bit, even if the width is the same on paper. It often points to small changes in the frame material, or maybe the design, maybe moving from a sharp edge to a more rounded transition where the metal meets the glass. It's all aimed at making it feel, I guess, more elegant and robust, like the source says, without changing the overall size. They're basically optimizing the structure they already have, which tells us, yeah, the Plus is probably their anchor device.
Okay, that makes sense. Right, let's talk about the big gun then, the flagship, the S26 Ultra. If the Plus is showing restraint, the Ultra is where we'd expect Samsung to really push the engineering limits. And even here, the leaks suggest the main focus is, again, slimming it down while still managing to expand the display.
Absolutely. The Ultra definitely keeps its top tier, pushing the envelope status. The screen gets a little bump, moving up to 6.9 inches. That's compared to, 6.8 or maybe 6.86 on the previous one?
Yeah, depending on how you measure the corners.
Right. And the new dimensions. 163.6 millimeters long, 78.1 millimeters wide, and the thickness comes down to 7.9 millimeters.
Okay, 7.9 millimeters. And let's compare that to the S25 Ultra. That was 162.8 long, 77.6 wide, and 8.2 millimeters thick.
So we see a similar pattern to the base S26, right? Just applied to a much bigger phone. The S26 Ultra gets slightly longer, slightly wider, probably to fit that bigger screen area. But yeah, the number that really jumps out is the thickness again, dropping from 8.2 millimeters down to 7.9. That's another 0.3 millimeter reduction.
Wow. And for a device that's already absolutely packed with tech, I mean, you've got the S Pen silo in there. That really complex periscope camera system shaving off 0.3 millimeters feels like a major engineering challenge. What do you think they had to sacrifice or seriously re-engineer to get that thickness down on their biggest phone?
The thickness drop, yeah, that feels like the ultimate strategic play here.
Yeah.
It's pretty unlikely they sacrifice battery capacity. Ultra users really demand that longevity. So instead, the sources are suggesting this efficiency push enhances the luxurious feel and actually provides additional space for internal components.
Wait, hang on. If they made it thinner, wouldn't they have less space? How does making it thinner create more space? That sounds contradictory.
Yeah, it sounds weird, but it's about the subtlety of internal volume optimization. So yes, the whole phone is thinner, but they also made it slightly longer and wider. That tiny increase in the overall surface area, maybe combined with advances in materials or how they layer the circuit boards, the PCBs, it means they could potentially arrange components like the vapor chamber and the battery more efficiently within that new shape. The source seems to imply they've actually sort of regained usable volume inside, maybe allowing for things like a larger, flatter cooling system, even with the slimmer profile. It's like designing for internal efficiency just as much as external feel.
Okay, I get it now. So it's not just about making it thin, it's about reshaping the whole volume slightly to pack things in better. Solving heat and performance issues through geometry, not just throwing in faster chips. That's actually pretty fascinating. How much strategy is packed into these tiny dimensional tweaks?
It really is. It feels like the strategy of a market leader that's focused on these small but really high-impact improvements, things that solve practical engineering problems.
Okay, before we kind of synthesize the whole lineup, let's quickly lock down the timeline based on these leaks. When can people actually expect to, see these phones in the flesh?
The leaked schedule looks pretty specific, actually. The official reveal for the S26 series, expected in late January 2026.
Late January, go right.
And following that launch event, global sales are expected to kick off pretty quickly, probably the first week of February 2026.
Excellent. Good to know. So let's pull it all together then. What does this all mean when you put the dynamic S26, the stable S26 Plus, and this newly optimized S26 Ultra side by side? How should you, the listener, really think about Samsung's overall strategy for 2026 based on these dimensions?
Well, I think we can see Samsung's gone for this very strategic kind of three-pronged approach based on geometry.
Yeah.
The S26 base model, that gets the most aggressive change. Proportionally speaking, it's thinner, it's taller, really maximizing that display. Maybe aimed at users who want the absolute slimmest flagship feel possible.
Right.
Then you've got the S26 Plus as the stable middle child.
Yeah.
Dimensions locked in, prioritizing manufacturing predictability maybe, and user comfort in a size that's clearly proven and sells well.
The anchor, like you said.
Exactly. And finally, the S26 Ultra. It proves that even at the very top end, that thickness is the #1 target for refinement. Using those slight size increases in length and width to kind of offset the challenge of slimming down the chassis, all for that more luxurious feel and apparently better internal performance packaging.
Yeah, the overarching message feels really clear. Samsung is like doubling down on refining what's already successful. They're focusing their engineering muscle on this precision dimensioning to unlock new efficiencies rather than taking big aesthetic risks this cycle, optimizing through subtle geometry.
It really is the definition of design maturity, isn't it? Fine-tuning.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing these sources so we could cut through some of the noise and get straight to these dimensional details and what they might mean. Thanks for joining this deep dive.
Absolutely. And maybe just one final provocative thought for you, the listener, to kind of chew on. We usually go caught up talking about a phone's quality based on its processor speed or the camera megapixels or battery milliamp hours.
Yeah, big specs.
But these sources really force us to think about the geometry itself as a core feature. Given Samsung's clear, painstaking focus here on shaving off tenths of a millimeter in thickness, this obvious attempt to strike a balance between beauty and performance, how much does that difference, that maybe barely perceptible change in thickness, truly impact your day-to-day use? And maybe even your final decision when you're buying a new phone? Are you ultimately paying for the raw performance specs or for how that chassis feels in your hand? It's something for you to maybe mull over.